Okay, there we go. I just hit record, first of all. For those who are not able to be here, I wanted to make sure that we recorded the meeting. So I'm going to advance here. So we have a special project as Sandy set up here, and as I am moving into my new role, really trying to understand the priorities for health partners across the board. I had the opportunity to connect with Dr. Sanis and Megan Remark, our Chief Operating Officer, on some priorities for the system and some really pressing needs. And this opportunity came forward. And so we wanted
Haley, there's still a
Yes.
sound issue for you.
Oh, you can't hear me? Hang
I can
on.
hear you fine.
I can.
I
From
can
my-
hear you
from
fine.
my
I
end.
can.
Yeah.
Oh. You can't hear me, Sandy? Okay, well, I'm gonna keep
Can
going.
anybody,
We can hear
They
you
can hear
too,
me.
Sandy.
I
Haley,
can hear you.
Yeah, and we can hear Haley.
unable to hear you?
Okay,
I can hear you fine.
I can
Okay.
hear you.
I'm gonna keep
Likewise.
going. Okay, thank you, Mike.
Okay.
I'm gonna keep
Then it's
going.
my problem. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we invited today Dr. Mark Sanis, who serves as the Chief Medical Officer for Health Partners, as well as Dr. Annie Eidecker, who serves as the Chief Medical Information Officer, to talk about ambient dictation. And in your packet, you received a one-pager that explains what ambient dictation is, as well as the grant application itself. But we wanted to bring these two on to really share some of the detail with all of you. And once they've shared that, we'll have time for some questions. I also have put together some financials for us to look at as a board so we can understand where these dollars would come from, and the alignment with our strategic plan, just to pull that all together. I will start off too by saying we do not have an intention to vote on this today. If the spirit moves you all and you want to, we have quorum and we can, but we also will have time to vote on this at our August meeting on the 26th. So, so please know that there is not an expectation that we vote today. We really want to give folks time to ask questions and think about this. But with that, I'm going to turn it over. And please just let me know, Dr. Sanis, Dr. Eidecker, when you'd like me to advance slides, but I'll turn it over to you.
You want to kick us off with introductions, Mark?
Sure. Number one, thank you for having us today. Annie and I are excited about this work. Dr. Eidecker has been serving in the role that has really moved the needle around clinician and physician well-being across the organization in regards to electronic health record advancements in the last 5 to 10 years now, and has been in this role as Chief Medical Information Officer for the past year and a half. I think the opportunity for us in care delivery right now is unique in that artificial intelligence and ambient dictation opportunities are exploding around the country. This, as Dr. Eidecker is going to show you, is a huge potential opportunity for our clinician workforce, not only for, I'll call it table stakes in providing care in an advanced multidisciplinary healthcare system in 2025, but also in retaining clinicians and keeping clinicians in a shrinking workforce that's happening really all around us right now. How can we continue to provide great care, yet reduce the burden of documentation as part of that? And I don't want to steal any more of Dr. Eidecker's thunder, and I think I'll let her sort of take it from here.
Thank you, Mark. I also want to echo just gratitude. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you all this afternoon, and for your consideration of this proposal. We think that this has the potential to be a really transformative thing that you could help us bring to our clinicians at Health Partners and Park Nicollet. And so I'm excited to share our journey, and I'm going to begin by just telling you a little bit about myself, because I think that this is sort of germane to why this topic is so important to me. and my colleagues. So I'm a family medicine physician. I still practice at Health Partners in the very same clinic that I joined, Health Partners, the Arden Hills location. I am in my 19th year with the organization. And like all of our leaders across care delivery, I still practice. So I see patients in a primary care clinic, taking care of um, largely adults at this point in my career with chronic diseases, and manage things like high blood pressure and diabetes, and do Medicare wellness evaluations, and sort of full scope of adult medicine. And so I'm going to speak to you about sort of some of the challenges that I and colleagues like me experience, and how we see ambient dictation helping to alleviate some of those challenges, and where we see kind of the opportunity in this space. And I'll also speak to my own experiences using this technology, and am going to be happy to answer some questions about it. So if we want to go to the next slide, please. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to walk through a little bit of background around, why are we even talking about ambient dictation, help explain what that actually is, what does it look like, how does it work, because I really want you to be able to sort of visualize, unless you've happened to have a visit in one of our clinics or somewhere where someone's using it. I think it can be a little bit hard to conceptualize. So I really want to explain how does it actually work in a practice. And then I'm going to share with you some details about our pilot project that we have had underway, and then talk to you about our vision for next steps and what that could look like, hopefully with your help. So Haley, if you want to go to the next slide, please. So just to lay a bit of context, so the electronic health record is a concept and a thing that I'm sure you are all familiar with. In our organization, we use Epic, which is one of the, is probably the single largest, widely used electronic health record in the country. And the electronic health records sort of came into existence in the late 90s and really got a push in the early 2000s. And then got additional pushes as our government sort of started to mandate use of the electronic health record. And there were a lot of good reasons and a lot of, I think, wins from having medical information organized in a way that is readily accessible using digital tools as computers became more widely available. And we had access, a way to have access to ever more information. There were a lot of good reasons why the electronic health record as a concept and as a thing really took hold, and is now just, that's how we practice, and that's the tool that we use to deliver care every day, everywhere. There are also some downsides, though, of the electronic health record. And one of the things that I suspect that our clinicians who are on this call, and I know some of you are here, would probably resonate with, is that our notes, as we had the electronic health record available to us, got longer. So some of the things that we did as clinicians on paper, pre-electronic health record, that were somewhat onerous, became significantly more onerous when the electronic health record was introduced. And instead of putting paper to pen and just scratching a few lines and going on our way, we are now keying in ever more data to feed this beast that is the electronic health record. And one of the things that has been looked at over time is just the growth of the length of the clinical note itself. And this graph is just showing you one study that has looked at this, where the length of a clinical note just between 2009 and 2023 has more than doubled. And this is looking at United States data. If you looked at United States data relative to other parts of the world, like European data, you would see that our notes are significantly longer than what you see in other countries, because the clinical note, the note that is produced documenting the care that you receive when you go see your clinician, no longer serves just the master of being a record of what happened to you at that visit, that your clinician or another clinician can reference at some later date to know what happened to you. It is now also serving regulatory masters, compliance masters, billing masters, and a whole bunch of other masters that have added increasingly to the length of what these notes look like in the electronic health record. And so we have observed that over time, the note has gotten longer and longer and longer. And in order to create a longer note, that means that someone is doing more work to create that longer note. So we'll go to the next slide if we could, please. So one of the things that has been examined as we've recognized that with the electronic health record, there's been increasing work in the computer required of our clinicians, is that a lot of that work actually happens outside of the clinic time. So this is looking at ambulatory or clinic-based data. This is not hospital data, but this is one example of a study that looks at the amount of time that primary care physicians, and it's also broken out separately as pediatricians and then residents, is spending in the electronic health record outside their scheduled clinic time. So gone are the days where a physician sees their patients, documents those, few lines in a paper chart that is the sufficient record of what happened at that visit, and then walks out the door at the end of the day or shortly thereafter the end of their clinic visit with work done. We are now seeing increasingly clinicians working outside of their scheduled clinic time, producing documentation and doing these other activities in the electronic health record. And again, referencing back to what are the good things about the electronic health record? Well, one of the things is you can see the electronic health record no matter where you are in the world. There's a computer in everybody's home. There's a computer in everybody's hand if they use a phone. And this ability to do your work is ever present, always present. And we see increasingly over the last 20 years, clinicians doing that work outside of their scheduled time in their office or at their jobs, which is a double-edged sword. We can go to the next slide, please. Here's just another example of some data looking, this is a little bit older data, but this is looking at how much time, and this is across all specialties, looking at ambulatory data, are spending in the EHR after hours. And the folks who the folks who describe this use the term pajama time. And basically what that's referring to is this is a time when a clinician or a physician might actually be in their pajamas, and yet they're doing work in the electronic health record to the tune of 9 or more hours per week, which is a pretty consistent number that you hear. And actually, if you added up the per day data that I showed you on the previous slide, you would get 9 hours or very close to that. So very consistent numbers. So if you think about an average work week of scheduled patient contact time for your physician being somewhere between 32 and 40 hours, depending on if they're 4 days a week or 5 days a week. Now we're adding 9+ more hours to that just in the EHR. And you can see why those numbers start to cause some alarm that our clinicians are having to spend so much time outside of their scheduled job to get their work done. And I thought it would be helpful just to add a little bit of additional context, and that is that the amount of time that we spend in the electronic health record isn't just documenting the clinical note that serves as the medical record of what happened in the visits that we had with our patients that day. There's a whole lot of other things that as clinicians we are doing in the electronic health record to document or to facilitate the care that we provide. For example, and Mark, I'd love you to jump in if I miss anything here, but before a typical clinic day, I am doing chart prep. I am reviewing the charts of the patients that I'm going to see the following day. I'm making sure that I've looked at their labs, I've looked at their imaging, I've looked at the previous notes of the other doctors that they might have seen in between the last time they saw me and the time that I'm going to see them. During the visit, I am hopefully spending some time focusing on and talking to my patient, but I'm also trying to get some documentation in so that I remember it, so that I know what we actually did and talked about. I'm placing orders. I might be ordering tests. I might be ordering imaging. I might be ordering medications or referrals. I'm also writing instructions so that I can give that patient a document that's their summary, that's their record of what we did, so they know what to do and what we talked about when they leave. And then I'm also, as I finish my documentation, which typically doesn't happen while my patient is sitting there, it's usually later in the day and sometimes much later in the day or days later, I'm also then dropping my charges, making sure I've got my billing information in. And before I finally close out the record for that visit. In addition to that, I am managing my ever exploding in basket. So think about your email in basket, but now I'm also seeing every patient call that comes to me, every online message that a patient sends to me, all the test results of all the tests that I ordered, every time a patient needs a prescription renewed that can't be done by the central team that supports me. I have all of those messages coming in as well as every time one of my patients get admitted to the hospital, discharged from the hospital, or sees a specialist that chooses to send me a note back. All of that stuff is happening, all of that activity is happening in the electronic health record as well, and I'm responsible for all of it. Mark, what did I miss?
I think just an overarching statement. We've seen publications in the last couple of years that would estimate for a primary care doc, for every hour they spend seeing patients, they probably approach a half hour to an hour of documentation. So specialties like mine in infectious disease, it's almost 1-to-1.
So we can go to the next slide, Haley. So what does this all mean? Well, one of the things it means is that with this increasing burden, frankly, of all of this work that our clinicians are doing, which again is much more time consuming than it used to be in a lot of ways, we're seeing higher rates of burnout. So burnout is a term that you're probably familiar with. It is not a good thing. It results in clinicians feeling desensitized, less empathetic, and some other risks to both them as individuals, but also their patients and healthcare at large. And we've seen a steady increase, and this graph unfortunately doesn't go back far enough, but these numbers are very concerning. Of course, there was a spike during the pandemic, but we've leveled out to 45% of clinicians reporting at least one cardinal symptom of burnout, and that has been consistent since before 2011, where we've seen these really nearly half of our clinicians, practicing clinicians, at any point in time report at least one cardinal feature of burnout, which should be alarming, I think, to all of us. So what are some of the impacts? Let's just talk about burnout. And this is where this is deeply personal to me. If we want to go to the next slide, I mentioned I've been here nearly 20 years. For part of that time, earlier in my career, I was a new mom. I had both of my children who have now survived into teenage years, and that's a whole different issue. practicing as a full-time family medicine doc, seeing 20 to 25 patients a day, doing all of that work in the EHR and trying to be a reasonably present mom for infants and toddlers as they grew. And there was a time where this burnout was very real. In fact, I almost didn't come back to the organization after my second child was born because I knew what I was going to be facing, and it was almost too much to imagine. Um, I'm glad I did. And I'm very glad that I am in a position now to be able to hopefully bring some solutions to our clinicians who are facing similar challenges. But what does burnout mean? So from a patient care perspective, if you're less attentive, if you are less compassionate, if you are just less capable because of the weight on your shoulders of engaging with your patients in truly meaningful and attentive ways, it can result in less good care, more errors, patients being dissatisfied. And patients who are dissatisfied don't typically adhere to treatment recommendations in the way that patients do if they are greatly satisfied. So it's problematic from that perspective. You've probably all heard stories about clinician well-being and the impact on both physical and mental health. Clinician suicide is a real thing. Very concerning that we've seen on the rise as clinicians are experiencing this. They're unsatisfied with their careers or dissatisfied. And one of the things that we see as a result of some of this pressure and this burnout weight is that clinicians voluntarily reduce their FTEs. And in fact, at our organization, we have a fairly significant number of our clinicians who don't practice full time. They are voluntarily reducing their income, reducing their earning potential so that they can just survive. And that's a real thing. And if you think about the difference between what it takes to recruit and hire and employ a clinician who's full-time, and also then having a clinician who has sort of that same um, uh, cost to the organization, but is only seeing patients 75% of the time. Like those are real numbers. And so burnout affects our healthcare system in really significant ways when clinicians choose to do that or when they retire early. Mark referenced the growing concerns that we have around the physician and clinician shortages. Those are real. That's not made up stuff. We do not have, and we will not have enough clinicians to care for our population as it ages, as it becomes more ill. And so it's an imperative for us to be able to recruit high quality clinicians and keep them through hopefully long and joyful careers. I've talked about some of the things related to the financial costs of burnout, staffing costs, productivity loss, lower team morale. That's one that I think deserves just a mention. If the clinician is suffering from burnout, they're not a good team player. They just don't have the capacity to be that that engaged partner, that engaged leader of a team. And that has ripple effects as well. And then, from a healthcare system perspective, like we can ill afford to lose the clinicians that we have. And we must be able to recruit new clinicians as people hopefully retire at the end of a long and full and rewarding career, and not too early because they just can't keep up with the work. So if we can go to the next slide. So at Health Partners, we've done a lot of work over the last few years to try to get after some of these challenges. We've done a lot of intentional work in our electronic health record in Epic to try to reduce the number of, we call it clicks. So every time a clinician has to click something in the EHR that isn't directly adding value to the care of the patient that you're caring for, if we can get rid of it, we've tried to do that. So unnecessary interruptions, We talk about these things like alerts that don't actually alert you to anything meaningful. We've systematically been going after that stuff for the last few years now, trying to make the experience that our clinicians have practicing using our electronic health record, our tools, less onerous and more efficient. And I know like some of our clinicians, Andrea and Deb and others, I hope that you have recognized some of that and maybe felt some of that work that's been happening behind the scenes to try to make that a little easier. We have some great tools that we've deployed for clinicians to actually support their documentation efforts with things that are embedded in our electronic health record that are like shortcuts, and dictation software where clinicians, if they're not particularly adept at typing or typing takes longer, they can speak into a microphone and then it turns it into text. They still have to, though, tell the whole story, and we'll get to that in just a moment. We've tried to make it easier to find information, all the day-to-day tasks that clinicians need to do. We've tried to optimize some of those workflows, provide more education. We have been very intentional about involving our clinicians in the design of their experience using the electronic health record, trying to make it fit to their workflows and their practices so that it's working for them instead of them working for it. And yet, despite all of that work, which has had, measurable and real impact, the documentation piece is one that we just have not cracked because we didn't really have the technology that would allow us to do that. And so documentation has continued to be the single biggest source of dissatisfaction that our clinicians have with their experience using the electronic health record, because that's where they spend most of their time. We can go to the next slide. So in 2022, something happened that completely changed that. And that is artificial intelligence, which folks have been working on for years. ChatGPT came into existence, and that single technological advancement allowed for an explosion at an incredibly rapid rate. And I'm sure some of you have seen, information on this, that allowed us to unlock the potential of artificial intelligence in a way that is actually meaningful and relevant to clinical documentation. And so, ambient dictation is the term used to describe what this is. And what it is it's a technology that listens. So think of your Siri or your Alexa or any other device that you interact with verbally. It's listening to the spoken encounter, the spoken words of a clinical encounter between a doctor and a patient, a clinician and a patient, the clinician and the patient and the family member, the clinician, the patient, the family member, and an interpreter. It can do all of those things. It just sits there, in this case, in our case, on a clinician's mobile phone using the microphone on that device, listens to the encounter, and then turns it into, within seconds, uses generative AI to turn it into, in about 30 to 40 seconds, a full draft of the clinical note for that encounter. The thing that used to take us minutes and hours and days to do now happens in 30 to 40 seconds. It's the single biggest transformative thing from a technology perspective that has happened in my career. I think, Mark, probably yours as well. This actually is a game changer in terms of giving time back to clinicians because the technology literally does it for you. And it does it very, very well. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But it produces the draft. So it listens. 30 to 40 seconds later, the draft of the note is right there on the screen, visible to the clinician, visible to the patient. The clinician still needs to read it, edit it, and sign it. But the hard work of actually creating the content is all done. And it's done better than anything that I could ever remember to do later that night at 8 o'clock trying to remember all the details of what I talked about for my 8 o'clock in the morning patient. It's fast, it's accurate. And so there are some key pillars to what defines good quality ambient dictation technology. And those are displayed here. Ease of use. It's got to be easy for a clinician to use. It's got to be efficient. It's got to be accurate. And then one very important thing for us in our experience of selecting a vendor and deciding to do this is that it was important to us that it be integrated with Epic. Our clinicians live and work and breathe in Epic. We did not want them to have to go to some other source or other application to be able to do this work. So we can go to the next slide. So why did we decide to get into this space? This has been an exploding field. Why us? Well, we are directly responding to the needs of our clinicians. We do this thing every year where we survey all of our clinicians on a whole bunch of different things about their experience being clinicians in our organization. We ask them about leadership. We ask them about, do they have the support that they need? We ask them about all kinds of things. And one of the things that we ask them about every year is their experience using our technology, and how satisfied, how good they feel about the time that they spend working, and how likely they are to stay working in our organization or perhaps not stay working in our organization. And we use a survey tool that's a sort of a nationally validated tool. We've been using AMGA. We just recently switched to a different survey this past year. But our results have been, pretty dismal in this space for a long time. We have moved the needle a bit with some of those interventions and some of those things I just described to you that we've already done, but this remains a very significant issue for our clinicians. We recognize this as a need. We've seen, and I referenced this a moment ago, how many of our clinicians choose not to work full time because they can't keep up with the workload that is required of them. And we were increasingly seeing that our ability to recruit clinicians to our organization was being jeopardized by not having this type of technology, because it really is becoming table stakes for healthcare organizations to have this available to their clinicians. And we want to recruit the best and brightest. We want high quality clinicians practicing in our organization. And so we need to be able to have a level playing field with our competitors who are trying to hire those same folks. And so we decided that we would explore this and kick off what we hoped would be a successful pilot. And so Mark and I, 18 months ago now, a year ago, sent out really an email to all of our clinicians, all 3,000-ish clinicians, announcing that we were going to start exploring this. No commitments, no expectations, no timelines. And just wanted to know who would be interested. And I have to say, just before I talk about my punchline here, is that clinicians are very unreceptive as a rule to change, especially change that involves technology. When we have to update our electronic health record, which is something that we have to do periodically, it is never meant with joy. It's always meant with hate and discontent, because you have to learn how to do something a little bit differently. And it happens twice a year at our organization that we do these updates. But in general, clinicians do not get excited about changes, especially those that involve technology. Well, this was a complete unexpected, or maybe expected, depending on how you look at it, a reversal of that position. I had over 300 inquiries, responses to that email in the first week. I think it was around 100 in the first 6 hours. We do send messages out to our entire clinician group. We try to limit that, but I don't remember ever ever sending out anything that got this amount of response, this amount of enthusiasm. And what that told us is that we were on the right track because there was a tremendous appetite for this if folks were that willing to respond. And so we can go to the next slide. We went through a vendor selection process. We looked around this space. There are really a small handful of vendors that are really mature and sort of met the criteria that we were interested in applying, which I have listed there. And then we went through a process that we do with any other technology that we're considering that's very deliberate. It's very detailed. We did reference calls with other healthcare systems. It wasn't hard to find them, including those right here in our marketplace, because this is something that many healthcare systems have already implemented. And if we want to go to the next slide, and we landed on a bridge, which is the vendor that we chose. And we worked with them to set up a pilot with the goals of improving clinician well-being, and learning about this technology, how it works in our system and with our patients and with our clinicians. And so we started this back in February, and initially started with 30 clinicians, and we wanted to represent a sort of a broad range of practices. Every clinician in our pilot then and now is in an ambulatory practice setting. We are not piloting it in any of our inpatient settings at this time, simply because of the sort of technical complexity. It's available. We just chose not to focus there for the purpose of our pilot. But we chose a bridge and we started piloting with them. And there were some specific things that went into our choice of a bridge that I just wanted to mention. One of the things is that we knew with technology like this, there would be a concern about like the trustworthiness of the documentation it would produce. Like, does it actually do what it says it will do? And one of the things we liked about this particular vendor is that it actually produces a real-time transcript of every word that is said in the exam room. And it's visible, it's right there. So if a clinician wanted to verify, like, did I actually say that? Or did my patient say that? Did I hear that correctly? It's right there in writing what actually was said. And we felt like that would be a good thing to have available to our clinicians. And that set this vendor apart from some of the other ones we looked at. The other thing that we really liked, and actually I remember seeing this, I vividly remember seeing this demoed for the first time. And it was one of those mic drop moments where they showed us how it would instantly generate a patient visit summary. So that document, that after visit summary that we give to patients or we publish to their online account if they don't want paper, that summarizes like what happened and what are your next steps. Here's what we did. Here's what you need to do. It does it instantly, and it's better than anything I've ever written in my life. And I pride myself as being a pretty good after visit summary writer. This was nothing like anything I'd ever written. It was so much better. And so we thought that for our patients, that would be a really good thing. The other thing that we liked about this vendor that also set them apart is that they do their work in 28 different languages and they're adding more. And that was important for us from the health equity perspective, and what we are really trying to make sure that we honor that we have a lot of patients from diverse backgrounds who speak different languages, and the ability of this technology to function in a way that recognizes and works in people's native spoken language, which also applies to some of our clinicians, was important to us. So we started our trial. Mark and I both chose to participate in the trial so we would know what the experience was of our fellow clinicians that we might be talking to about this. And Mark, I don't know if you want to just add a couple of comments. I remember hearing from you on day one of your experience using it, and I just wonder if you would share some of that.
Sure. I think the main thing I would say is having this tool in the background really allows a clinician to engage with patients. And it was the first thing that I noticed, caught myself, talking to the patient and not looking at a screen, which I think is going to be a huge advantage for clinicians. But from a practical point of view, from the clinician experience side of this, I finish my notes in clinic probably 10% of the time. I do a reasonably good job of getting patients in and out on time, but I don't get my documentation done in general until after the clinic. And it's probably a couple of hours of documenting that happens. I'm in month 4 now of the pilot, and I have yet to leave clinic with notes to finish. So in 20 years, for me, this is the single biggest thing that has ever happened from a flow of how I work in the clinic space. I pride myself in doing fairly good notes, and I have also been impressed by the quality of the note that is generated as well. Sure, there's some quirky things with formatting and other things that I'll work out over time as we teach this, but I think what has been most impactful for me is yeah, that's what happened. I mean, this is a reflection of what that visit looked like. I think it was a satisfier for the patient, and it's been a huge satisfier for the clinicians that are doing this in regards to getting that note documented, almost in real time right after that visit is finished. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, and I would echo, that's been my experience. One of the first thing I noticed is that I was actually talking to my patient, listening to my patient, and not thinking about, oh, I need to remember this, or oh, I need to write this down. That cognitive effort of trying to remember all of these things for later is gone, because I just know that the technology is doing it for me. I also want to comment on patient receptivity to this technology. We do a verbal consent when we introduce it. We say, I'd like to use this to take my notes for me, or whatever, language feels comfortable. I personally have yet to have a patient say, no, that's not something I'm comfortable with. We would certainly honor that if they did. But I have yet to see a patient that has said, no, I don't want that. It is actually the opposite of that. I've had patients want to talk to me about it and celebrate it. Oh, this is great. Oh, I guess you won't have to be working late at night. Or this is, they just sort of expect it, because AI type of tools are so much part of their day-to-day lives in so many ways, because of just where this, we all have Alexa and Siri and all those other things. So I was actually surprised by how willing and actually more than agreeable patients were to, excited about it even, about having this be part of their visits. So quickly, I just want to show you then some data. No good pilot is a pilot unless you are actually collecting data and want to do something with it. So thank you, Haley. So we measured a bunch of stuff. Now, we saw good results in all of the areas we measured. So the amount, the clinician's perception of the amount of time that they spend on their documentation, it got better when they used a bridge. The stress that they feel because of their job went down when they used a bridge. I think if we did these same surveys even 3 months later, once they got even more experience with the tool, we'd probably see even better results. But we chose to time box it pretty tightly because we wanted to get some good early indications of whether or not we were on the right track. One of the things I will also mention, and Mark sort of signaled this, is it does even better for you the more you use it and the more you learn how to use it in your practice. But our clinicians who have joined our most recent wave of our pilot, they were trained to use it in 30 minutes. It is so intuitive and it is so easy that a clinician can learn it in 30 minutes and then go use it in their clinic, that for their very next patient. If we want to go to the next slide. So again, this is another look at some of our metrics. We saw, and this is measured using our data out of our electronic health record. So, it's real information, the amount of time that clinicians were spending outside of work, time and notes per day, time and notes per appointment, time in notes per note and chart closure, all of those things improved. The one that I really want to call out is on the bottom. And I sort of referenced this earlier, the amount of time that it takes to actually close a chart improved by 94% in our pilot group. That means that notes were getting closed same day, whereas it used to take an average of over 2 weeks. Now, I don't know if that was selection bias with the folks that decided that we chose to participate in the pilot. I don't think that entirely explains it. But the point is, those notes are closed, those charts are signed, those encounters are dropping for billing. The work is done that day. All right, next slide, please. Here's just another way of looking at some of the improvements. So these are all going down, and that's what we want. This is time by clinician, and just using a few of our clinicians as representative examples. And we saw this really across the board. We can go to the next slide. But this is my favorite thing. So I'm not going to read these to you, but we have been collecting feedback from our clinicians in a variety of different ways, including the unsolicited feedback that they are sending me and our team over email, over chat messages, over text messages. And the one that I didn't write here, but I wanted to just share with you because it leaves a lump in my throat every time I think about it, is the email that I got from one of our psychiatrists on the very first day that he used it, where that afternoon at about 2:30, he emailed me and said he was done with his notes for the day, and it was the first time ever that he was not leaving his clinic in despair. I carry that with me because that is real. That is the sentiment expressed by a clinician who used the word despair. And the thought that we can take away despair and allow for a more sustainable and joyful practicing medicine. I mean, that's the kind of thing that will get me up every day and come to work. All right, we can go to the next slide. So we learned that this technology performs in all the ways that we hoped it would. It reduces time, it improves experience, it's wonderfully integrated with Epic, it works, the training and support is easy. In short, our assessment was, this is a good thing. The vendor that we piloted is the vendor that we should go with for broader implementation. So feeling confident in that recommendation, what we want to do now, and if we can go to the final slide, is we want to make this technology available to all of the clinicians at Health Partners. Our plan for how we would do this would be a phased approach. We've learned a lot as we've done this pilot and scaled, and we feel confident in our ability to implement it actually fairly rapidly, with a goal of doing 1,000 clinicians by the end of 2025 and a fast follow to bring it to the rest of our clinicians in 2026. That is the end of what I was hoping to tell you about. And I, at this point, would be happy to answer questions or have any discussion. I see a lot of messages were coming in on the chat, but I'll be honest, I wasn't looking at them as they were coming in.
Dr. Thorpe had a couple of questions there, and it looks like we've got some hands up as well. Can you see the chat, Annie?
I'm looking at it right now. Does not interfere with the flow. Okay. Okay. How orders are placed during that? Is that any different? Can it listen in on phone calls, video visit? Okay, these are great questions. It does not place orders or penned orders yet, but that is my ... that is in development. That will be coming. I fully expect that will be, and that was actually one of the reasons, Deb, that we were so deliberate about wanting an Epic integrated solution, because you have to have that to take those next steps. of supporting those other workflows that we have as clinicians. And yes, it performs with video visits and virtual visits. It requires being able to hear the conversation. That's what it requires. As long as it can do that, it can create ambient content. So I regularly use it for virtual visits in my practice. Our behavioral health clinicians in particular, they do a lot of virtual visits and they've been using it successfully. Does it do just as well with English about special? Yes. So it does a great job. One of the things actually that we were really interested in understanding is that aside from its ability to perform in 28 other languages. So like if your patient was Spanish speaking, for example, and your clinician was Spanish speaking, or you had a Spanish speaking interpreter in the room, would it work? Yes, it does. The other thing we were interested in is what about patients or clinicians who are speaking English, but it's accented? Because we have that too. And it does very, very well in that circumstance as well.
Yeah.
And is
Deb,
the cost
my
better
first
than with
patient-
scribes? Yes.
Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say, Deb, my
Sorry.
first patient that I was in the trial with was Amharic speaking with a complicated parasitic infection. And it was a better note than I could have created with probably 2 hours of my own time that came out of that. So it does very well. Use of interpreters, not a problem. So,
Right. Mr. Ahmed.
Yeah, just a couple of comments and two very quick questions. They're all really related. You know, I've always wondered, how do doctors remember what they did 7 hours back? That's a mystery to me, but there's that. Who really makes sure the accuracy of the ambient dictation? Because if there's an error, it might go down the path of a rabbit hole, and it might be a lot of work to really unwrap that. So that came to mind. I also know it's a software, and any software that I've dealt with needs a lot of money to keep it upkeep. So as you're looking at the budget, I'm 100% sure every 2 years or so there'll be a lot of more. So I'm sure you guys are looking at that. But I have two main questions. This software sounds like it is morphed into what started out as patient care. Now you have a lot of different masters. You have billing, you have insurance, you have a litigation society, so you have compliance and all that. So as we are designing this, how do we make sure that we keep that really focused in terms of the patient part? But my biggest question is it going to free up time? And I know right now the financial stress that the hospitals are in and the work that is going on with Medicare and all that. And any organization that spends money always thinks about ROI. And so I see a scenario pretty quickly, whether you like it or not, that, you know, the doctors are going to free up, so you got to see some more patients, so you can earn some more money. So how will you balance that? Because I'm not in your organization from that perspective, but I see it coming. And you know, as an outsider looking in, I think accuracy, employee well-being, and the patient well-being should be the three things in that order. And how do you make sure that the free time doesn't get chewed up by other stuff?
Love those questions. Going back to your first comment about you've always wondered about how the doctors, well, you know, I think what we've done hopefully a little bit is peel back the curtain and explain that we're not great at that, quite honestly. And you've probably had encounters with clinicians that were, you know, scribbling furiously while they were sort of half listening to you and writing. And then that scribbling gets translated into a dictation hours later, days later, and it's not great. I'll be honest. Then that's one of the things that we find so compelling about this is that it's all happening in real time. And it doesn't miss. And if you're worried that it missed, you just go back and look at the transcription and then you know. So from an accuracy perspective and its ability especially like in primary care where we see patients, but it's never for one thing, it's for 10 things. And its ability to capture all of that instead of me remembering, I don't know, 7 out of 10 when I go to do your note later, it's better actually than what humans by themselves can do. In terms of the final output and validating that it is accurate, it's incumbent on the clinician, just as it is without ambient dictation, to read, to review, and to confirm by their signature that what is in that note is accurate. So no different than if I misspoke a word in a transcription or mistyped something or just completely got it wrong. If I weren't using this technology, it is still my responsibility to validate that it's accurate and correct it if it's not. So from that perspective, I hope that answered your question about accuracy. To the other comment, I mean, you're spot on. If we free up time, what happens to that time? Well, I can tell you from our pilot, this is what we've seen. We've seen some clinicians that are walking out the door, as hopefully Mark is, and I'm trying to, at 5:30, and their notes are done. They're going home. They're not logging back into Epic. They're not getting back into the computer after hours to do work because it's done. They don't need to. They're happier. They're having dinner with their families. They're going to their kids' sporting events and not worrying about this thing that's hanging over their head for the 20 charts that they need to dictate, the next morning. We've also seen some clinicians release holds that they had on their schedule. Many of our clinicians put holds on their schedules, meaning they don't see patients so that they can catch up. And we actually encourage that so that they can try to keep caught up and stay on time and get their work done during the workday. But even with that, it doesn't work. It's not enough. And so we've seen clinicians, even in the first week of using it, who reached out to their clinic managers or their directors, not with any prompting whatsoever from us or our team or anybody, saying, hey, you can take those holds off. I don't need them anymore. My notes are done. I can see another patient. And we've seen several examples of clinicians just voluntarily finding their way to that, which is better for access. It's better for their patients. It's better for the organization's bottom line if we can see more patients and have a place for them to go. But we've not set that as an expectation, and we don't intend to. This is about well-being. This is about the table stakes investment that we want to make in our clinician workforce. If those other things happen, for some of our clinicians as a result of that, then I think that's great, but that's their choice. Mark, would you add anything to that?
I think you said it very well. We don't come in with preconceptions on driving more productivity with this. We think it may happen, to your point. I think logically, if I have 60 more minutes in my day, I may choose to fill some of that with more patient care. And if we do that, it's going to help us with access in areas where we need it. We have more demand than we have capacity to provide care right now. So we're hopeful that wait times and things like that will fall as a byproduct of this. But again, if you're going in with the mindset that we are trying to make this a more meaningful interaction with our patients, to your point, where folks are actually talking to each other and not to a screen, and also looking to free up time for that clinician that they are not spending their evenings documenting their day. Those are our biggest priorities in this. And if the rest come, that's going to be a bonus for us.
All right, thank you.
I saw Deb's question on cost. Scribes are an expensive resource. Most scribes, where if you have a in-person scribe with you in the room all day long, it's probably north of, and Annie, correct me if you know better on these numbers, it's probably north of $20,000 a year, pushing 25 for some. And this is a fraction of that if you go on a per clinician basis.
The other
And
thing
again, this is not an expense that will be borne by the clinicians. I guess that's the other thing I will say.
Yeah. The other comment I'd make is the other flavor of scribes is a virtual scribe, where either the visit is recorded and then transcribed by somebody, a human, listening to the encounter, which is similarly expensive, although not as expensive as an actual human in the room with you. But one of the challenges with scribes is that the people who become scribes are usually using that as a stopping off point to get into medical school. It's just true. It's a great place for somebody to get experience in healthcare and then go on and do the other thing. And it's usually go to medical school. So there's this continuous cycle that our clinicians bear of having to continue to retrain and train and retrain the new scribe on every 1 to 2 years. And with AI, you don't need to do that. There is no training of the technology. It just does it. And so again, at a fraction of the cost and better and more accurate and without that investment, for all those reasons, we feel like this is far superior to scribes. Sue?
Annie and Mark, I would like to present a question first, followed by comments. My question is, what kind of due diligence was done on the selection of this vendor, and how many were looked at, and how in-depth was the due diligence done, and by whom was it done? So, I mean, it's many things.
Yep.
The reason
Dr.
for my
Eidiker.
question.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
The reason for my question is that I have a very long career in very deep, very high technology design control, medical devices and biotechnology. 10 years ago, I left industry to become a consultant with emerging technologies and working with entrepreneurs, small startup companies, organizations that were in chaos, organizations that were having difficulty with keeping up with the technology and the design control documentation. They were getting warning letters from FDA. They were losing CE marks in Europe, a lot of chaos, okay? So the back end of AI is very black. It is not good. Unfortunately, the train has left the station, and the clinical effects of it are indisputable. I mean, it's wonderful. It is really wonderful. But the back end of software development, keeping up with it, CTOs trying constantly to be working with the marketing groups that are presenting this to organizations, they're really quite overwhelmed because the funding for them in this very short development period is so high. And because of that, the costs are enormous, and there aren't experienced technicians. Platforms that these engineers work on are varied, and they are not usually standardized. Design control is very often not documented. And so as a result of all of these things, I have a very deep concern for the due diligence done in choosing a vendor. Like I said, the train's left the station. It's a wonderful technology. It absolutely is. But my concern is working in this industry and having this experience. What kind of funding does a bridge have? While we were talking, I was doing a lot of work here.
Mhm.
I was on FDA's websites.
Yeah.
I was on biotech websites. I was doing a lot of research while you were talking. I'm sorry, I might have missed some of the clinical aspects.
No,
But
Annie,
you
you
know,
want to talk about the vetting process a little
Yeah,
bit?
I'd be
Yeah.
happy to. I really, so I appreciate the questions and the commentary. From your perspective as somebody who's been, deeply involved in, in this industry and has seen, I think, the consequences of
and
some of these.
I am not doing design control right now. Oh, I am involved, but I'm in the regulatory
Yeah.
aspect at this time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I can tell you the process that we use. So we started, as we do with any sort of technical sort of evaluation by defining our requirements, what we wanted out of a technology, what we felt like was going to be important, sort of like the table stakes, the must-haves and the nice-to-haves. And then we worked with the team that goes out and basically sort of puts the word out to vendors in this space to say, tell us, tell us if you're interested in submitting a proposal to us. Give us sort of some basic information that we will then review and kind of start that weeding process. We already had a pretty good idea because we have a relationship with Gartner, for example. We work with Class and other organizations that help us keep an eye on what's happening in the industry. We don't trust just ourselves to try to keep up with all that. We use partners that is their job. So we had a pretty good idea of who we would see as potential viable candidates, but we wanted to do the due diligence of giving people an opportunity to respond. Once we got those responses, we narrowed it down to, I think it was 5 or maybe 6 that then went through the next step of the vetting process where we got more information. And this is where we started to get really detailed on the technical specs. And we were particularly interested in we have an AI governance group at Health Partners, which is, they are front and center in evaluating this type of technology from a security and safety and privacy and all the things perspective, as well as the actual technical infrastructure pieces of it. And they spent, I was going to say weeks, it was months looking at these various proposals and further helping us weed out, candidates. And then we saw demos. I think at that point we were down to 4. And we saw them actually, and it's of course their sales team, right? So they're putting their best foot forward, showing us all the bells and whistles, and trying to sell us on the idea of using their product. We didn't even let them talk to us and have those kinds of sessions until our technical security privacy team had already done their work to ensure that this is even somebody we could contemplate. Then we saw demos, then we narrowed it down to 2, and then they went through an even more rigorous process before we finally landed on a bridge as our initial pilot. Now, I'll just tell you, the other vendor that was our number 2 is Microsoft's product. It's DAX. And we're a Microsoft shop, so it made sense for us to look at Microsoft. And they are the only 2 that actually can say they are fully integrated with Epic. So it wasn't surprising that that's where we landed. And I'll tell you my bias, my personal bias, I'll just share, was I thought we would probably end up with Microsoft because we were a Microsoft shop. We are a Microsoft shop. And I thought that the tremendous power of Microsoft would be something that would be attractive and valuable and helpful to us. And actually, the further we got into our relationship and next steps, that actually proved to be a barrier. Because this is all that a bridge does. This is all they do. It was started by a cardiologist. He is a practicing cardiologist. They've been funded through various rounds of VC funding, but now they are one of the 2 dominant players in this space. Last year, Kaiser went all in with a bridge. That's who they chose. So we are in very good company with other big and bigger healthcare systems who've gone through the same process. And I would say ours is probably on the conservative side. And that's okay. This is a place where I am perfectly happy to be conservative, even if it takes longer and makes our patients and our care system safer. But we are in good company with other organizations who've decided that, yeah, a bridge is the best fit for them as well. Now, since we've been piloting a bridge, I'll just let you in on another little thing that is, I think, really exciting, is that they like working with us too. So I mentioned our behavioral health clinicians that started our pilot in February. Since we've been in pilot with a bridge, we've actually had a co-development opportunity where our behavioral health clinicians have worked with their development team, and they now have a behavioral health specific note that they didn't have when we went live in February, that was influenced by the feedback from our clinicians, sat at a table with their developers, with their physician developers, and said, here's what we need, here's what we'd like, here's how it should look, here's how it should work. And that is now the note that is used across all of a bridge for behavioral health. So I think their smaller size and their hunger to really develop a great product, we see evidence of that. The biggest risk, and I will tell you that this is a risk that we've talked about a lot, is that because they're not a Microsoft, are they at risk for being bought by somebody else? That happens in this space. I can't say that that would never happen. We're building as many things into our contractual relationship with them to try to, mitigate that potential risk. But I've talked to their CEO. I really believe that his heart is in the place of trying to really make healthcare like simpler and more affordable for our clinicians and ultimately for our patients. And I've seen no signs, and that they may be there and they may come someday that if they're not there now, but I see no signs that a bridge is looking to, be gobbled up by somebody else. They are very dedicated in this space and they're working on lots of things, and they've invited us to participate, which is unusual for a software vendor to really have a partnership that feels like a real partnership instead of a partnership that's just on paper.
Thank you.
Mike.
So first, as a lifelong sales guy, good job keeping the salespeople out before you got in a conversation. So good call on that. But two things. Number one, I'm curious to know why do you think there was a double in characters in a note, right, from the beginning of whatever the time period was to today? Was it due to insurance requirements for reimbursement or what? Okay,
Yes.
Okay, good. And then two, how much time do you think of that roughly 9 hours a week, right, that has been spent in the EMR? How much time do you think will be saved just taking the notes section away, knowing that there's still orders that need to be ordered or in basket messages to respond to? And how much time do you think just this part alone will save?
I'd be curious to hear from Drs. Thorpe and Singh on that one as well. But personally, I would guess it's over 80% of my time documenting, if not 90. So this has been life-changing. If I was practicing full-time, 4 days a week in clinic or 4.5 days a week in clinic, this would be absolutely life-changing.
Yeah, for sure. That's cool. Thank you.
I would agree, Mark. That seems about right. Never having used the product at all, and even struggling a little bit with making our dictation system work for me, and having to go back and retype and knowing that you'd have to over time train the ambient dictation system. I can't imagine that you wouldn't save 75 to 80% of the time in Epic outside of the clinic time. I think that would be a huge breakthrough, and quite honestly, probably would have let me keep working for a while.
Dr. Singh, I know you've got colleagues who are using it. Would you add anything?
Nothing more that's been said. It's a great technology. I think it's the right way to go. And it definitely is a huge time saver for our clinicians. So, and we can talk in our afterwards in our committee meeting about, the nuances that I've seen with my team members, specific to pediatrics, but it has been working well for our team. And we've also talked to the team at a bridge about opportunities to make it easier because, right, one of the nuances of my world is that a bridge is going to have to interpret when a 2-year-old says, uh-huh,
Mhm.
and talks in 2-year-old language, and how do we translate all of that? And it's been working well. So
I was gonna say 75 to 80%, Mark, so we are right in step with how we thought about answering Mike's question, which is, I think it's an important one. We're not gonna take it all away, although, I think, Deb, you mentioned something earlier about orders, like that is actively being developed. So beyond documentation, this is going to be technology that helps us address some of those other data entry, sort of computer-centric tasks that our clinicians are doing today. It's not going to do it all for you, but it's going to tee it up, serve it up, make it easy. And then, also the ability to sort of look into the chart to the 97% of the patient's medical record that you never see because you're focused on what you're focused on, and serve up suggestions, prompts, increase your awareness about things that you might not have seen otherwise. That is also actively being worked up, which is going to help us provide even better care.
Yeah. And Haley, I want to be respectful of the board's time. Just one last comment from my perspective. I have been fortunate to be a leader that's come to this group in the past. The work that we have done around physician and clinician well-being, you'll recall, started as a foundation grant from Nicollet Foundation to get that work off the ground. Just as we saw that early process get us going as an organization, we moved that project, and now we have a robust physician and clinician well-being program in operations that we fund fully from operations on a go-forward basis. As you're considering this request, know that that isn't our intent. Again, as we get this off the ground, we intend to move this into operations and into annual budgeting hereafter, and humbly ask for your support as we try to get this off the ground here in the latter part of 2025.
Thank you so much for your time, your thoughtful questions, and appreciate the opportunity to meet with you tonight.
Yeah, and I think we will go away, Haley, is my understanding, and we'll let you guys carry on.
You have other things. Yeah,
Very
we'll
good.
take the last 10 minutes and walk through a few things.
Very good.
But
Thank
thank
you
you
all.
for your time. Really appreciate it.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
I-
Okay. We're dropping like flies. So I'm gonna quickly share my screen. Because okay, first of all, thank you for your engagement with that and for the questions. I think, this is new, and it's definitely a big ask. It's a $5.1 million ask. So I do want to take just a minute to talk you through how we would fund this project. As you know, anytime something like this comes to myself and Pete, we look really closely at what funds are available and how we might be able to do this. This is also a system request. And so I want to just acknowledge that on the front end. This is for everybody. This is not specific to Park. And so as we looked at, well, let me go back because that's going to be noise. So as we looked at different options, now as I move into this role, I have much more visibility. Well, I shouldn't say much more. I have some more visibility to the funds that exist across the 8 foundations. There are haves and have-nots. Like, that is just how we are structured. The have-nots truly don't have much. They're very small foundations. They don't have a ton of resource to be able to participate in a big project like this without taking a really big hit. Regions would be the other more equivalent option as a partner that could fund this program. They have some commitments to their area of greatest need fund, and they've also, quite frankly, there's as we've gone through some of this transition with the structure, there's a strategy to Park doing this. And I will just own that that's selfish on my part. And I think it's also strategic on our part as Park Nicollet as we move into this new structure and can really build some momentum around how do we do things as a system and how do we model that for all 8 foundations. So with that said, I want to show you how we would fund this. This would come out of area of greatest need. So just to give you a really brief overview, this top half of this slide is history. So the average annual contributions, these are donor gifts to this fund, is about $208,000 a year. That ebbs and flows. It's not our biggest fund by any means in terms of dollars in from contributions. It is our largest fund though, and here's why. Every fund that we have at the foundation is invested and has investment income on an annual basis. So all of that income goes into the area of greatest need fund. It doesn't go back to the fund of origin. So it all gets dumped into this area of greatest need fund, which is why the fund is so large. So the average income is about 1.2 million. I will say that's low compared to what we've seen in recent years. But of course, our current world we live in, there's some volatility to the market. So as we look at over the last 14 years, so 2010 to the end of 2014, there has been contributions to that fund in both contributions and investment income to the tune of north of $21 million. The breakdown of that, 3.1 million was actual donor contribution, 18.2 million was investment income. So that's an important part of this strategy here. So then as we look at 2025 specific data, we looked at contributions January through the end of June. So this is just 2-week-old information. We're at 170,000 in contributions so far this year with a goal of 240. We'll land right around there. The investment income through June is 1.779 million. So it's already above that average. Again, volatility in the market. We don't know what will happen, but this is what it looks like as of today. And the fund balance as of the end of June is $14.2 million, almost 14.3. So a conservative estimate, I did this math, the conservative estimate of what's available in just interest to spend, not touching a dime of donor dollars, is 11 million. And how I did that was I took this current balance, this 14,267, and I subtracted all the contributions from the last 14 years. There's no way that's true. We have spent some of those contributions, but in the spirit of giving you a really conservative what's left and what's sitting there, that's just investment income, it's 11,145. So as we look at this over time, this was shocking to me. Pete and I looked at this and we're both pretty blown away. So only 15% of what's been in this fund since 2010 is contribution. The rest of it is all investment income. That's not to say that it's not Park Nicollet money. It is, but it's also not donor dollars. It's income on investments. And as we think about donor intent, which we talk about a lot on our board, that is the most important thing to us. And the reason why I feel comfortable bringing this to you as a potential project for our foundation is because we could comfortably say we're not going to spend any donor dollars, that we're going to spend investment income, and that we're going to leave the corpus of those donor dollars alone. So I wanted to just show what this looks like. So then the other piece, oh, please, Deb, go ahead.
Take myself off mute first. Can you be more explicit a little bit about the strategy behind having Park fund this?
Yeah. Yes. So I'm going to walk through it in a couple of slides here, but so there were 3 options that we looked at. When I talked to Dr. Sanis, Penny Cermak, the CFO, who you all met a few months ago, and then Megan Remark, I told them I would go back to the drawing board. They told me this was the number 1 priority. So I went back to them with 3 options. Option 1 was to take a bite out of all 8 foundations. I'll just be honest, that didn't make any sense because there's not enough in particularly the smaller 6 foundations to make that make sense. That didn't feel like we were taking a bite that they didn't have to give. So then option 2 was we split it, regions and Park. And, as I mentioned earlier, Regions they have a very healthy area of greatest need fund. It is not as healthy as ours. Theirs is less than $10 million right now. They do have some commitments coming out of that fund, however, that we don't have. So they've got some commitments that are already on the books that didn't make sense from a financial perspective to take such a big bite, would leave them with not a whole lot. Additionally, as I mentioned, this is selfish and I will just own it, and this is being recorded, so that's even better. God. This transition has been really, really difficult. And quite frankly, I want to position this new structure to be as successful as possible. I am working through some really challenging situations with regions on their board right now. This is not a hill that I won't be able to win on this hill. So it's a hill that I could die on. I could. I also think Park Nicollet is really positioned to do this project for the system and get credit for it. And that's where the selfish part comes in. I want our name all over this. And if we had time, I was going to ask Mark to comment on that, because I think Park Nicollet coming to bat for everybody to make this happen, not only because because we've been good stewards of our dollars, but also because I want to model the way of how we can do this for the system as a whole. I've also been very clear, Park's not going to do this again. So this is an opportunity for us to say, this is how this is going to work, Regions and Lakeview and Amory, but we're not going to take the bite for everybody all the time. But in this current financial situation, we are in the best position to do it. And we know that the impact based on the pilot and based on the feedback from clinicians has been really positive. It's not a clean answer, Deb. I will own that, but it is my true answer. So there's that.
All
It is
good.
an opportunity. It is an opportunity to, I guess, lead and set, kind of lead by example in a way. And one of the things that I understood is that as you look at kind of organizationally, and maybe Deb or Andrea or Haley or others could speak on this, when you look at kind of how organizationally HP and Park Nicollet have come together over the years, there's a lot of folks that are in leadership positions that have actually come from Park that now are in HP wide positions of leadership. And I mean, is that the case, or is that true?
Mark Sanis is an example, right? Didn't he
Yeah.
start at
Yeah.
Park?
Correct. I think there's been a deliberate
Yeah, there's been, yeah.
attempt in the past to blend leadership from where your legacy has come from. So yeah, there is.
Yeah, and I think the leadership at Park has done a good, from before the merger, has done a good job of mentoring the leaders that are now in the
place.
positions of leadership. They started as mini leaders, and they really grew a lot under really competent Park senior medical leadership. And I think that you're seeing the fruit of that across the organization right now, like Mark, for example.
Haley, when you
Yes.
finish, I just want to put it in one piece from my perspective of being the grants chair to hopefully set us ready to vote at the next meeting. So, but you finish, and I want to just share what my experience has been, not knowing much about the grant work until I had a call from Haley a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, you bet. I'm going to go through this quickly. I will share this slide deck along with the recording with the full board. But it was really important to me too, as we looked at this opportunity, to look at how it aligns with our strategic plan that we spent a lot of time on. So these are the 3 pillars that I pulled out as really clear connections. So I did a slide on each one of them. Workforce development, retention, and support. You heard this from Dr. Eidecker and Dr. Sanis. We know that clinician burnout and dissatisfaction is a real challenge. According to our EPIC things, and this was in the request itself, we're in the bottom 25th percentile for the amount of time our clinicians are spending in their notes. So implementation of this system-wide is going to help. We heard all that from Dr. Eidecker. Innovation and research. This is innovative. It's new, as Annie said, and as Sue commented on as well. This is a new frontier. It's and we want to be able to be on the front end of that. And innovation really showed up loud and clear in our strategic plan, improving the team, improving care quality, that continuous improvement that we're constantly working towards. And then that alignment with the mission to really empower our clinicians and enhance that patient experience. Then we look at family and patient experience. Joan commented on this, both Dr. Eidecker and Dr. Sanis did as well. Really those face-to-face interactions, a better experience for our patients all around. And satisfaction improves for all parties involved. So then finally, and this is in alignment with the comments that Eric just made, but this demonstrates, I mean, selfishly, again, this demonstrates really visionary leadership for Park. It helps us to invest in a system-wide project that's going to benefit the whole. And models that collaborative philanthropy. It accelerates the system integration when we look at one care group and when we look at the centralized leadership structure, and then building credibility and momentum, and finally inspiring that confidence and really giving philanthropy a seat at the table. Our name's going to be all over this because I've asked them to include our name all over it because that's what we need to be doing. So